We are back inside City Hall, and as we've been telling you, investigators think that the shooting of 28-year-old Akai Gurley in East New York's Pink Houses by a police officer was accidental. Late Friday, the mayor and the First Lady and the police commissioner, Bill Bratton, paid a condolence call to Gurley's loved ones. Joining me now to talk about how the mayor has handled this situation are the four members of our Monday Consultants Corner. This week we have Republican consultants Jessica Proud and Marcus Reese, and across the table we have Democratic consultants L. Joy Williams and Jonathan Yedin. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming in. And we asked you to grade the mayor's handling of this. This is a pretty sticky situation on a lot of different levels, including political. Let's start with you, Jessica.
I gave him a B. I think he deserves high marks for how he's handled so far. The response, visiting the family, he's smoothed tensions. You know, we certainly have not seen any protests or, any violence from that. So he deserves credit for that. But I think there's two larger issues at stake here. One of them is police training, and clearly that needs to be revisited. It's hard to understand why, with no clear and present danger, a cop would have his weapon out of his holster with the safety off. It's just a tragic situation, what happened. And the other, I think, really is something that's plaguing his administration, is that it's one thing to talk about, income inequality and have all this lofty rhetoric about fighting for the poor, but sometimes it just comes down to good management, and part of that is mundane tasks like making sure that the light bulbs are working in the public housing. And I think everyone has to ask themselves if the public housing authority is better off today, a year later, under his administration. And it's not the sexiest thing, but it clearly matters.
Oh, interesting, and a fair question. Joy.
So I have the great pleasure of, not only commenting on this as a consultant and sort of giving an advisement that way, but also leading an NAACP, which fights for social justice. And I gave it incomplete. Because while definitely there is the immediate response in terms of being able to communicate immediately what the department and the mayor believes happened and visiting the family and things of that nature, but the larger issue of how this mayor is going to manage a police department that clearly has this mistrust with communities of color in the city, there is still an incomplete on that. And so I agree with Jessica on the training. I agree also in terms of the management but I don't want to completely blame this just on a light bulb being out. There are clear missteps there. And it's not just on that individual officer. There is a system that failed both the officer, but mainly it failed the young man who lost his life. And collectively, it is only our communities that continue to experience this loss of life, like these, quote, accidents that I don't want to blame it there. There is the management that allowed this young officer who's only been on the job 18 months to be in this situation, and that is what needs to be managed.
Okay, Marcus.
Overall I like to give the mayor an F as it relates to this issue, but I did bump it up to a D because I appreciate that he did show his face and I think he's making strides. But overall, if you're asking yourself, what are the things that are most known about this administration this early on, and if you would have guessed that police brutality would be this prevalent, if this would be the thing that he'd be grappling with, you'd say something is going wrong within the administration. This is not the sort of thing we expected from him, this sort of progressive warrior. It's a problem that he needs to get solved very quickly. I think it's permeated, has national implications as well, and I just don't think he's handled this thing overall very well.
Well, now it's interesting now because there's the perception, and then there's just the hard numbers, right? So the perception may be one thing, but the reality is we're at record low. I'm sure it looks like we're on track to end the year with another record low in most categories, especially violent crime, the one that everybody cares about.
Sure, which makes all the matter worse. Again, I think your average New Yorker thinks is that we live in a very safe city, relatively speaking, which again shows that there's no reason for this issue to be so prevalent among people's perceptions about the administration. Bottom line, I think if you were to poll New Yorkers about de Blasio administration, they'd say, one, he's late all the time, and two, there's a problem with police brutality.
Interesting. John?
I gave the mayor a B. Very similar sentiments to what Jessica said. I think that something needs to change with respect to training of police officers. Why were there two rookie cops paired together in an area that has a higher crime rate than some other areas of the city? That's unacceptable. But with respect to what Marcus just said, I would say that a lot of it, though, a lot of the narrative, he has a problem out of his press shop, and he needs to do something about it, because there's no question that what's happening at his press shop is sort of taking over what people think and his perception of the administration, because you're right, the data shows one thing, which is great, and the perception out there is a totally different thing, which is a problem, and that's something he needs to do. And some of the tabloids really aren't helping him out with a lot of that, but he needs to do more about it.
When it comes to perception, is he? I mean, he's mostly, I think, probably getting criticized by people who either didn't vote for him or were inclined to criticize him in the first place, right?
Well, yes, and this issue is a particular sticky situation, one in which that plagues many mayors, right? So both in good times and in bad, many mayors have had to deal with the issue of the relationship between the police department and communities of color. And I think the difference is that we expect different from de Blasio. And so that is the difference in what puts him at a sort of a higher level and a higher bar to reach, in that we expect more.
Now, interestingly enough, there was a conversation about the Ferguson situation, and we are by no means going to ask you in just a couple of minutes to delve into all of that stuff. But over the weekend, America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, was talking about the situation, and it strayed into some other areas, and it was an extraordinary, well, I'm going to ask you to analyze this politically. Does this appearance and this sort of presentation signal that Mayor Giuliani has given up on any notion of returning to public life? Let's take a look.
93% of blacks are killed by other blacks.
Let me respond to that.
I would like to see the attention. I'd like to see the attention paid to that you are paying to this. Why don't you cut it down so many white police officers don't have to be in black areas?
They don't have to be. It's a matter of the effect of the state occupying those forces, sir.
How about 70 to 75% of the crime in my city?
How about your
takes
attitude
place
reinforces
in black
the
cities?
Problematic
I think this is a debate
that prevails in the culture, sir?
This is a debate. You reduce crime?
This is a debate.
When I become mayor, I'll do that.
The white police officers won't be there if you weren't killing each other.
That's our Rudy. September 10th, Rudy, back.
This is the problem. And this is the problem that social justice activists and all of those who are pursuing justice consistently see throughout this system, is that there are people that exist like Rudy Giuliani who believe that people of color are inherently criminal. And believe that this relationship between officers and communities of color is one in which you need to control the violent ones. And that is what we're up against. He believes that. And that mindset is what we are consistently fighting against, that which people believe that they have this fear of being in communities of color. We are no more violent than any other human being in this on this planet.
First and foremost, I think it shows that you would have done a much better job moderating that. Number two, I think begrudgingly, if you ask sort of liberal New Yorkers, progressive New Yorkers, how they feel about Giuliani's policies and the result of it, I think you'd get sort of a begrudging acknowledgement that he made things better in the city as it relates to crime. But what it does put on display is that he has a very hard time communicating. And sort of phase two of community relations between neighborhoods, police involves constructive dialogue, and that was absolutely not constructive in any way, shape, or form.
Well, at all. He communicated very clearly what he believes.
Yeah, but Joy, Obama said essentially the same thing at the same time on a different program. The mayor certainly could have been a lot more artful in the words that he chose, but it's a notion. I mean, I don't think there's any elected official in this country that has had as much success as he has in reducing crime in minority communities. And it's something that he's not talking about it from the outside. He lived it, and he has accomplishments that he can point to. So, of course, there's going to be criticisms of it, and there's certainly he could have communicated it a better way. But it's a point.
Not just a means of communication.
I disagree with you that it's a racist point, or that he was trying to say that black people are inherently, criminals. He lived and breathed it, and it was. That's not what he said. And Obama said essentially the same thing.
Well, but I mean, what I heard Giuliani saying, and I just dismissed it because it's just you can't get into sort of collective punishment. You know, if you would fix the problems in your community, then we wouldn't have to come in and brutalize some of you.
Which was
this is legally and morally just a non-starter.
I totally agree.
That is not messaging away in the same thing that the president said. It is not.
He was saying that there is higher crime in minority communities, and we need more of a police presence. law enforcement
That is
presence
not
there.
what Giuliani said.
Rudy took it one step further there.
I'm not saying that he didn't maybe cross the line in what he said, or he said
There
it
was no
in a very
definitely
inartful way.
But this is the guy who knows his way around a TV interview, right?
Right,
So
it made for great
was he,
TV.
What was he trying to do? I mean, if he
people
said
to
this in
talk about it in
Bensonhurst,
order
we
to
would
stay
know
relevant.
exactly what he was trying to do.
He's trying to
But
stay relevant. I mean, he
who?
ran for president, got crushed. Everybody. I mean, a lot of people are now going to be talking about this interview, and some people are going to think maybe he was on something or something. I mean, he was nuts. I mean, what he said was really too much.
When it comes to discussion about crime, because in other progressive urban areas, they replicate a lot of those same policies. The problem is it devolved into a shouting match, and that's where he sort of lost his
here's
mind.
the bottom line. If he were to say he wanted to run for anything at all, would you say to him, do more of that, or would you tell him cut that stuff out?
Not.
All right.
Unequivocally no.
I thought we'd all agree on that. And on that note, we're going to say goodnight. Thank you all for coming by tonight. We're going to take a short break now. I'll be back with a preview of tomorrow night's program. If you want to weigh in on what we were just talking about, you can do that on Twitter, @Errol Lewis or @Inside City Hall is how to reach us. We're back in a minute.